I wanted to make a video to do with the music from the first Alien film written by Jerry Goldsmith. It's one of my favourite film scores, and there's so many good bits in it, but these are just some parts that sort of jumped out to me, and I felt like trying to play on the guitar. I'm not trying to play it in a way that's, you know, exactly the same. I think it's a good example of sort of changing things around a bit to get closer to the original kind of effect. I mean, changing it so it fits on a different instrument in a way, you know. So I thought I'd have a talk about, you know, what's going on and some things like that. So there's this first bit, that I play at the start. This kind of section, I've kind of moved things around a bit, so this is in, all the notes in this first section are coming from E minor key, or however you want to think of it. I'm just thinking of it E minor, you know, 1 sharp, like that family of notes. Even if it's not doesn't really feel like E minor maybe, but that family of notes. But it begins with there's a lot of edgy kind of sounds in this piece of music. It begins with this very edgy sound, just this exposed major 7 interval, which I find really, really evocative. It's a good example of, if we're thinking about putting something on the guitar, the importance of the string set, because to me this sounds more effective than this, even though it's the same pitch. Maybe, I'm not sure how well it comes across in the recording, but it just sounds more full on string 2 rather than string 1. The B note, I mean. So it's kind of written as if it's, you know, like 2 lines. You got 1 line on top, da, da, and 1 on the bottom, do, do. And together you get. But I quite like the effect of holding down this C note, because it forms this, you know, it's an A minor triad, with the 3rd as the lowest note, the 3rd in the bass, which just seems to fill it out nicely, you know, if you're just playing on the guitar by yourself. So this, it follows with another very edgy sound. It's got sharp edges, so be careful. It's B and C. So I guess I'd call it a minor 9 or a diminished 9, or however you call it. B and C. Very, very like. So, but it feels very kind of evocative to me. And this move, how it goes. This thing in particular. It's kind of interesting because you've gone from B and C to C and B. So you've almost, I feel like it gives a funny effect in your mind if you hear it a certain way. This kind of figure comes up quite a bit throughout the whole soundtrack, I think. This augmented 4th with a perfect 4th on top. Just this shape. It's kind of just used as a I don't know, just as a sound. It doesn't necessarily have to imply something more normal or more conventional, I guess. Although if you wanted to relate it to something like that, probably the most familiar thing to most people, that sound would be like a, you know, 13 chord. It doesn't sound like that to me, really. It's just a sound on its own, and it's kind of a feature that keeps coming back. So, and it's the first kind of, in this other melodic idea I played afterwards. This crops up as well throughout the overall soundtrack, with chords in the background and stuff. But I really like just the melody on its own. Just seems to sound really kind of eerie, that spacey feeling. It's a funny soundtrack because to me it gives the feeling of wonder, but also the isolation. Like it does feel quite like there's a lot of like wonder in the sound, like being in space and stuff. But also there's the feeling of being isolated in space as well. So it's a weird combination of feelings, but I like it effect on its own for some reason. But it obviously begins with that exact same figure. It's very kind of ambiguous sounding, especially when it's just played on its own like that. I don't really know how you'd call it. I find it very evocative though, anyway. That idea is repeated in a different register after that. Same figure again. But with a bit more of a kind of more resolved ending, I guess. So the key I've put these in is so it just kind of ends up in this E minor-ish space. So for this very iconic part, it plays over an E pedal. I've heard in different kind of recordings, or maybe just from different parts of the film or something, in different keys, but there's always this pedal underneath. I just changed it to E, obviously, just on the guitar. It just kind of makes sense, I guess. So if we talk about the chords for this part, what's happening there, there's obviously a succession of ideas where each one is like kind of like a pair of chords, really, over a same pedal note. So the first one here is the first pair of chords, if you like, is an E minor triad, just in root in the bass, and then you've got to a B minor triad in first inversion. So obviously they're quite similar. Top note's just the same. So there's nothing too crazy happening there, but it's very kind of evocative. I like it a lot. Next thing that happens, so this just sort of feels like regular, E natural minor kind of center. The next part I found it quite tricky to get the same feeling. I found what worked best was to kind of simplify it a bit on the guitar, and I was thinking of it as two pairs of notes. So this is basically a minor third, and this is basically a major third. And I guess that's basically how I'm thinking of it. And it kind of gives, especially over the E pedal, gives a kind of sense of like an E diminished sort of sound. If you finger it this way, very little movement. You can hold it down. It seems to fill out the sound a bit, if you're just playing guitar by yourself. That's why I did it that way. So the next pair of chords is these two, which of course is a flat minor triad, just with the root in the bass. Oops. To a B flat major triad with the fifth in the bass. If you think about the root motion there, what's really happening is, if you played it like this, but over the E pedal the character's different again. There's a lot of tension on this one. Over the E, you know, there's the E and an F in there. This is interesting because, you know, on paper you could call this an E major 7. To me it doesn't sound anything really like an E major 7. It definitely sounds like a minor chord over a separate bass note. That's how I'm kind of hearing it. It doesn't sound anything like this, because the register of that E is just so different. So it's kind of curious how that changes the effect and the meaning. And then the last one in this pair is exactly the same principle as that one, in that we've got, you know, we've got a minor chord with the root in the bass, followed by a major chord whose root note is a tone up, but it's got the fifth in the bass. So we've basically got E minor to F sharp major in a second inversion, if you like, with the fifth in the bass. The effect is like this. You know, if you add the root note in underneath, so you hear it that way, but over the E pedal. So those are just a couple of the ideas that sort of jumped out to me listening to it. Like I say, I've sort of rejigged them a bit, but this way seemed to just fit nicely. Like physically on the guitar was okay to play, and the tone seems good on it. It's kind of a funny thing, like where you play something on the guitar can make it sound really resonant or just make it sound like dead. Sometimes it's hard to explain, but this seemed to work okay on my instrument. So hopefully that was interesting, or you like the sound. I'll obviously put some you know, links to the actual soundtrack in the description. But thanks for watching.